My fiancée called me embarrassing in front of everyone and ended things without hesitation. I stayed calm and walked away. Months later, she saw me at an event being introduced as the guest of honor in front of her. "You're embarrassing me." 3 words. Flat. Delivered without flinching. Not whispered into my ear in the hallway. Not texted at midnight when she had time to think about it. Said out loud. Right there. At a dinner table full of 12 people who all turned to look at me in the same half second. Her friends. Her coworkers. Her older sister, Vanessa, who had always looked at me like I was a stain that hadn't quite come out. And Vanessa's husband, who I had never once seen smile with his eyes. The restaurant was one of those places with low lighting and high prices where people go to feel important. Crystal glasses. White linen. A waiter who refilled your water before it even dipped below the halfway mark. And in the middle of all that polished, curated silence, Claire said it. Loud enough. Clear enough. Like she had rehearsed it. I set my fork down slowly. I didn't look at her right away. I looked at the table. At the pattern in the cloth. At the candle flickering between us. And somewhere in that moment, in that 2-second pause that probably felt like 5 minutes to everyone watching, something inside me shifted. Not broke. Shifted. Like a door quietly clicking shut. I didn't know it then, but that moment changed everything. Let me back up just slightly. Because context matters here, not a lot of it. Just enough. If you enjoy real stories like this, subscribe, because what happened next changed everything for me. I was 31. Claire was 29. We had been together for 3.5 years. Engaged for 7 months. I worked in structural engineering, the kind of job where you spend most of your days reviewing load calculations and site plans and meetings that could have been emails. Claire worked in marketing for a mid-sized brand consulting firm. She was good at her job. Very good. She knew how to read a room, how to control a narrative, how to make something sound better than it was. I should have connected those dots earlier. But I didn't. Because when you love someone, you don't analyze their skills. You just admire them. That dinner was a send-off celebration. One of her colleagues, Brooke, was leaving the firm to move to Vancouver with her partner. It was meant to be a fun night. Casual, Claire had said. Just dinner with some of the work crowd, she had said. I had come straight from a site visit. I was in clean clothes, but I hadn't had time to go home and change into something sharper. Dark jeans, a plain gray button-down, clean boots. Nothing offensive, nothing remarkable, but apparently wrong. The table was full of blazers and blouses and people who had coordinated their outfits to the venue's vibe. And I walked in looking like myself. That was, apparently, the first crime of the evening. Dinner started fine. I ordered something from the menu I couldn't fully pronounce, which made the man across from me, her coworker, Trevor, laugh a little, not unkindly. Claire smiled at him, not at me. I let it go. Conversation flowed the way it does in groups where half the people are trying to impress the other half. Stories about campaigns, client drama, someone's vacation to Lisbon that had apparently been life-altering. I sat and listened. I added things where I could. When Brooke mentioned her new place in Vancouver and started talking about the condo building, I mentioned something about the seismic standards in that region. Nothing complicated, just something I knew. Claire laughed, but not at the comment. The kind of laugh that says, please stop. I noticed. I didn't react. I should have noticed sooner that this laugh wasn't the first one of its kind that evening. Then came the moment. Someone at the table, I think it was Amber, Claire's closest friend from university, asked what I did. I gave the short version. Structural engineering. Bridge components, mostly. Some commercial building work. Amber nodded, genuinely curious it seemed. She asked a follow-up question about how long a typical bridge project takes from design to completion. I started to answer. And that's when Claire cut in. Not to add something. Not to redirect the conversation gently. She said, can we not make this a lecture? Her tone was light, but the edge was there. The table shifted. A few people looked at their glasses. Amber blinked. I stopped mid-sentence. I started. You're embarrassing me, she said. There it was. The full version. No cushion. No qualifier. Just, you are embarrassing me. In front of 12 people. At a restaurant with tablecloths that probably cost more per meter than my first car payment. I want to be honest about what happened inside me in that moment. Because it wasn't rage. It wasn't humiliation, not exactly. It was something colder. Something that felt like clarity arriving 3 years too late. I looked at her. Really looked at her. And for the first time in a long time, maybe ever, I saw her without the version of her I had constructed in my head. She was waiting for me to apologize. I could tell by the angle of her chin, the small way her shoulders had drawn back. She was waiting for me to say sorry. You're right. Let's move on. And the table was watching, waiting to see which direction this would tip. I said nothing. I picked up my water glass, took a sip, set it back down, and I said, quietly enough that only the people nearest to me heard it, I think we should talk later. Not sorry. Not you're right. Not I didn't mean to. Just, we should talk later. Something crossed her face. Fast. But I caught it. And I recognized it. It was the look she got when something didn't go the way she'd planned it. The rest of dinner was exactly as uncomfortable as you would expect. I ate. I didn't say much. When someone asked me something directly, I answered. When the conversation drifted, I let it drift. Claire was animated, laughing at everything Trevor said, touching Amber's arm when she made a joke, working the table the way she worked every room she walked into, performing. I was a piece of furniture she was decorating around. Brooke, the woman the dinner was actually for, leaned over to me at one point and said quietly, "That was out of line, by the way." I looked at her. She gave me a small, sincere look. "Just for what it's worth." "Thank you," I said, and I meant it, because in that whole table of 12 people, she was the only one who said anything. We drove home in her car. She drove. Silence for the first 6 minutes. Then she said, "You always do that." I looked at her. "You go into explanation mode," she said. "In social situations. It makes people uncomfortable." Amber asked me a question. I said. She was being polite. She asked a follow-up question. I said. "That's not politeness. That's interest." Claire exhaled through her nose. "You don't understand how these people operate," she said. "They don't want a TED talk about bridge infrastructure." I gave them 2 sentences, I said. It felt like more. I looked out the window. The city lights were doing what they always do, reflecting off everything wet and dark. "Claire," I said. "What?" "You called me embarrassing in front of your entire work circle." Silence. "I know," she said. I waited. She didn't add anything to that. "That's it," I said. "What do you want me to say?" she said. "You were being awkward." I said something I probably shouldn't have said the way I said it. But it's done. It's done. Like spilling a drink. Like a minor inconvenience. 3.5 years. A ring. A date circled on a calendar. And she filed it under. It's done. I didn't say anything else that night. The next 3 days were strange. We existed in the same space like 2 separate weather systems that weren't quite touching. She went to work. I went to work. We had dinner on the second night. She talked about a campaign her team was pitching. I nodded. Asked a few questions. Normal seeming. But something was different. And I think we both knew it. I just didn't know yet exactly what shape it was going to take. On the third night, I came home and she was sitting at the kitchen table. No food. No phone. No laptop. Just sitting. That was unusual. Claire was never without a screen in her hands. I set my bag down. "We need to talk," she said. I pulled out the chair across from her. Sat down. "Okay," I said. She had clearly rehearsed this. I could tell the way I can tell most things about people who have rehearsed something. The sentences were too clean, too sequential. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," she started, "about us. About where we are. About where I want to be." I said nothing. Let her continue. "I don't think I've been happy," she said. "Not for a while. And I think I've been blaming it on circumstances, but the truth is, I think we want very different things." I looked at her. "I want someone who fits into my life more naturally," she said. "Someone who understands the world I'm building. And I don't think." She paused. Regrouped. "I don't think that's you," she said. I sat with that for a moment. The refrigerator hummed. A car passed outside. "Are you ending the engagement?" I said. She met my eyes. "Yes," she said. No hesitation. None. Just, yes. I nodded slowly. And what she probably expected, what she had probably braced for, was anger, argument, negotiation, tears, even. She had a response ready for all of those. I could see the shape of it in the way she was holding herself. What she got instead was me standing up, calmly, sliding my chair back. "Okay," I said. She blinked. "Okay," she said. "Okay," I said again. I went to the bedroom. I packed what I needed for a few nights. I came back out with my bag. She was still sitting at the table. She looked, not upset exactly, but thrown, like she had prepared for a storm and gotten a clear sky instead. "That's it," she said. "You said it yourself," I said. She flinched, just slightly. "I'll get my things properly over the weekend," I said. "Where are you going?" she said. "I have somewhere," I said. And I walked out. My colleague Owen let me stay at his place for 2 weeks. He didn't ask many questions. He made coffee every morning. He had a second room that had a decent mattress and enough distance from everything that I could breathe. I'm grateful for that. The first week was the worst. Not because I was devastated in the way movies tell you devastation looks. Not dramatic. Just hollow. The weight of 3.5 years of expectation sitting on your chest without the thing that was supposed to justify it. I had imagined a life. A very specific, detailed, color-by-number life. And now the picture was blank. I went to work. I reviewed plans. I attended meetings. I answered emails. And every evening I came back to Owen's guest room and sat with the silence until it became familiar enough to sleep in. Owen brought it up once, about a week in. He slid a mug of coffee across the counter to me one morning and said, "You doing okay?" "Actually okay." I thought about it honestly. "I think so," I said. "Did you see it coming?" he said. "Parts of it," I said. He nodded. "The dinner thing," he said. "Brooke mentioned it to Nathan. Nathan mentioned it to me. Small world, engineering. She called you out in front of everyone," he said. "Yeah," I said. "That's not a one-time thing," he said. "That's a pattern." I looked at him. He shrugged. "Just saying. In my experience, people don't say things like that once. They've been thinking it a long time." The dinner table was just the first time the volume was turned up. I didn't respond, but I thought about that for a long time after. Because Owen, without knowing the specifics, without knowing everything, had named something I had been quietly cataloging for months without labeling. The small corrections, the redirections in conversations, the looks across rooms, the introductions that somehow never included what I did for a living. The "you always do that" had arrived like it was old news. All of it. Pattern. I found an apartment 2 weeks later. Signed the lease on a Tuesday. Moved in on a Thursday. It was smaller than what I had been used to, but it was mine. Clean lines. Good light. A window in the living room that faced east and let in the morning in a way I hadn't expected to find comforting. I built a routine. Work. Run in the evenings. Cook something real on weekends. Owen and I started meeting for lunch twice a week. I called my brother. He was out of state, but he called back the same evening I reached out, and we talked for almost 2 hours, which was more than we had talked in the whole past year. And somewhere in those small, unremarkable weeks, I started working on something I had been putting off for a long time. I need to explain something here, because this is where the story shifts, and it won't make sense without this. For 3 years, almost the entire time I was with Claire, I had been quietly working on a structural methodology paper. Nothing glamorous. Nothing that sounds impressive at a dinner party. It was a technical paper about load distribution modeling in suspension bridge components, specifically a new approach I had been developing that could reduce material costs by a meaningful margin without compromising safety ratings. I had been working on it in pieces. Evenings. Weekends. Stolen hours. Claire knew about it vaguely. She had called it my homework once, which I found funny at the time. Less funny now. I had never submitted it. I had drafted it, redrafted it, reviewed it, questioned it, shelved it, come back to it. Because I was never sure it was ready. Or, if I'm honest, because the person I was living with made me feel, in 100 quiet ways, that things I spent time on outside of what she could show off were not worth the space they occupied. After I moved out, I finished it. In 6 weeks. I finished the entire final version. Owen had a colleague at a structural engineering conference committee, a man named Dr. Calloway, who ran an annual symposium that people in our field took seriously. Very seriously. Owen read the paper, forwarded it, without telling me he was going to Dr. Calloway. The call came on a Wednesday morning. I was at my desk, going through elevation drawings for a commercial project. Unknown number. I almost didn't pick up. "Is this?" And he said my last name. "Yes," I said. "My name is Dr. Calloway. I run the National Structural Engineering Symposium. I received your paper from Owen, your colleague. I've read it twice." I set my pen down. "I want to discuss it with you," he said. "Of course," I said. "I want to feature it," he said. I was quiet for a moment. "Feature it," I repeated. "As the keynote work of this year's symposium," he said. "We'd like to invite you as our guest of honor. You'd present the paper, take questions, participate in the panel. It's a significant platform. We've had attendees from 41 countries at the last event." I sat back in my chair. The window was doing its morning light thing. Clean and quiet and very still. "I'd be honored," I said, and I meant every syllable. The months between that call and the symposium were the most focused I had been in years. Maybe ever. I refined the paper further with Dr. Calloway's team. I built the presentation. I practiced it, not in the mirror, but out loud, to Owen, to the empty apartment, to the walls that had heard most of my better thinking anyway. I bought a new suit, not because I needed to impress anyone, but because it felt like the right way to walk into that room. Dark navy, clean lines, nothing flashy. Exactly right. I did not tell Claire any of this. We had had almost no contact since the night I walked out. There was a brief exchange of texts about retrieving some remaining items. A few cold logistics. Nothing personal. She had moved on in the visible ways people do. I heard through indirect channels that she and Trevor from the dinner table had become a thing within weeks of us ending. I noticed this the way you notice weather through a window. Aware of it, not in it. The symposium was held at the Meridian Convention Center. 3 days of panels, workshops, presentations, and networking. The kind of event where people carried lanyards with their institution names and exchanged business cards like currency. I arrived the morning of the second day, which was when my keynote presentation was scheduled. Dr. Calloway met me at the registration desk personally. He was taller than his voice had suggested. Warm handshake, reading glasses on a chain around his neck. The kind of man who made you feel, immediately, that you were where you were supposed to be. Ready, he said. Getting there, I said honestly. He laughed. Good answer, he said. The main hall was enormous. They had set up a stage with projection screens on either side. Round tables filled the floor. Maybe 400 seats. I walked the stage once while it was empty. Looked out at the empty chairs. Thought about nothing in particular. Just breathed. The morning session ran first. A panel on urban infrastructure challenges in coastal cities. I sat in the audience for part of it, listening, taking in the room. And that's when I saw her. It took my brain a full 2 seconds to process it, because it was the last thing I expected. Claire, sitting at a round table, maybe 20 meters from the stage, with Trevor beside her, and 3 or 4 others I half recognized from that dinner. My body understood it before my mind did. A small, cold drop in the center of my chest. Then, nothing. Just stillness. I sat with the recognition for a moment. Then I understood. Of course. The symposium had an adjacent conference, a brand and communications summit happening in the same building, same days. Claire's firm had clients in the construction and infrastructure space. It made perfect logistical sense. She was here for business, and she had no idea that I was here for anything other than watching from a chair in the crowd, because she had no idea what I had been building while she was busy deciding I was embarrassing. I did not approach her. I did not avoid her, obviously. I found Owen, who was sitting with a group of colleagues near the back. He saw my face and immediately knew something was up. You all right, he said. Claire's here, I said. He blinked. Claire. Table 7, I said. He turned casually, looked, turned back. He said. Yeah, I said. Do you want to leave? He said. I shook my head. Good, he said. Because you've got about 2 hours before you walk onto that stage. I nodded. And somewhere in the simplicity of that, 2 hours, then the stage, I found the ground under my feet again. The lunch break came and went. I ate with Owen and a few others. Talked through the afternoon lineup. Kept my back to her table, not deliberately, just naturally. I didn't want to see her before I needed to. I wanted to walk onto that stage with a clean head. I got changed in the speaker's room behind the main stage. Navy suit. White shirt. No tie. Dr. Calloway had said I didn't need one, and he was right. I looked at myself in the full-length mirror they had propped against the wall. The person looking back at me was steady. That's the only word for it. Not nervous. Not performing calm. Actually steady. 3 years of someone quietly dismantling your sense of occupying space correctly. And here was the answer to that. Not revenge. Just the real version. Finally being seen in a room that could see clearly. The afternoon session opened with Dr. Calloway on stage. He welcomed the full audience. A fresh wave of attendees had come in for the keynote session, filling seats that had been emptier in the morning. I was watching from the wing. The crowd was full. I could see Claire's table from this angle. She was half turned toward the stage, but I could tell her attention was loose. The way it gets when you're somewhere out of obligation rather than interest. Trevor had his phone under the table. Very subtle. Not very subtle. Dr. Calloway spoke for a few minutes about the year's theme, sustainable load engineering and the future of material efficiency. And then he said the words I had been working toward without fully realizing it for years. This year, our guest of honor is someone whose work represents exactly the kind of thinking this field needs more of. His paper on suspension load distribution modeling has already been peer-reviewed by members of our committee as some of the most original methodology we've seen submitted to this symposium in the last decade. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our keynote speaker and this year's guest of honor. He said my name, my full name, into a microphone. in a room of 400 people, and I walked out. The lights hit differently from the stage. You don't quite feel the size of the room until you're standing at the front of it. The applause started and moved through the space like a wave. I stepped up to the podium, adjusted the microphone, looked out, and across 400 faces, I found hers. It took me maybe 4 seconds. Because her expression had already changed. She had turned fully toward the stage. Her chin was slightly dropped, and she was staring at me with an expression I had never seen on her face before. Not during anything in our 3.5 years. Because she had never looked at me the way the room was looking at me right now. With attention, with expectation, with the specific quality of regard that comes when 400 people in your field have gathered specifically because of what you built. Trevor was looking at her. She wasn't looking at him. She was looking at me. I held her gaze for exactly 1 second. Then I looked away. Not coldly, not with performance, just elsewhere, because I had a presentation to give, and the room deserved my full attention. I spoke for 42 minutes. The presentation went the way hours of preparation earns you, clean, confident, with enough room in it for the audience to breathe and engage. I walked through the methodology. I explained the problem the existing models had. I showed the numbers, the margin reductions, the safety test comparisons. There were questions from the audience, good ones. The kind that challenge your thinking rather than just repeat what you said. I answered each one. By the time it was done, the applause had a texture to it that was different from the polite kind. Dr. Calloway shook my hand on stage. Outstanding, he said quietly, close enough that only I heard. I thanked him, and I walked off the stage feeling something I can only describe as complete. Not triumphant. Complete. The reception afterward was held in the adjoining hall. Drinks, light food, the natural exhale that happens after a formal session. I was surrounded almost immediately. People from the audience with follow-up questions. Researchers who wanted to discuss adjacent work. A woman from a university in Amsterdam who said the methodology aligned with something her department had been exploring and could we exchange contacts. Owen was beaming from across the room in a way he would absolutely deny if you asked him about it directly. I worked through the conversations one by one. Genuinely. I wasn't performing anything. I was just there, fully there, in the way I had never quite been allowed to be at a dinner table with low lighting and tablecloths, and people who had decided before I arrived what kind of person they expected me to be. She found me 40 minutes into the reception, thought about the version of me that had walked into that restaurant in clean jeans and gray button-down, who had sat quietly while someone he loved dismantled him with an audience, who had driven home in a car full of silence, who had packed a bag and walked out of a door without raising his voice. That version of me, that quiet, steady, unspectacular version, had been exactly who he needed to be in that moment. Not because silence is always the right answer, but because the right answer, for me, was to not waste energy in a room that had already decided what I was worth. The energy belonged somewhere else. It belonged here, in this room, on that stage, in that paper. I want to say something clearly, because sometimes when you tell a story like this, people hear the wrong lesson in it. They hear, patience is revenge, or success is the best response. That's not what I'm saying, where I let the moment linger and mean something designed. But that's not how real things feel. Real things feel quieter. Real things feel like east-facing light on a Tuesday morning. Like a phone call with a brother that runs 2 hours longer than expected. Like a paper that took years and finally got finished in 6 weeks when there was nothing left in the way. Real things feel like walking off a stage and knowing. Not because someone told you, not because a room applauded, not because an ex-fiancée finally looked at you without deciding in advance what she was going to see, but knowing because you already knew. You'd known for a while. You just needed the room to catch up. The last thing I'll say is this. The ring I had bought, before any of it, was a very good ring. Not flashy. Simple. I had designed something custom for it. A small structural detail in the band that nobody would notice unless they looked closely. After everything was over, I didn't sell it. I kept it in a box on the shelf. Not out of sentiment for her, but because I had put real thought into that ring. Real care. And I didn't want to erase that just because the person it was meant for had not been paying attention to the right things. There's someone out there, I think, who will look at that ring and immediately ask about the detail in the band. And not because she's polite, but because she's actually looking. That's the whole story. No villain. No dramatic confrontation. No moment where I made her feel small the way she made me feel small. Just a man who got up from a table, finished his work, and walked onto a stage. And somewhere in the crowd, The room finally understood what he had always been, even when she didn't. Especially when she didn't.